On this episode of On Top of PR, we're talking promises and pitfalls, the ethical use of AI for public relations practitioners. Our guest is Matthew Marcial, the CEO of PRSA. And during this episode, we're going to talk about AI and PR ethics, AI in practice, PRSA's role, as well as some leadership tips he has for us, and a special offer for our audience today. So be sure to pay close attention as we go through this important topic, and you'll want to stick around for the end.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd.
Matt, welcome to On Top of PR.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. This is a great topic. Anytime we talk about AI, it seems to be very popular. So to set the stage for our audience, PRSA developed this guide to help PR professionals use generative AI responsibly, balancing innovation with transparency, ethics, and credibility. Matt, what led PRSA to develop the Promise and Pitfalls guide on AI?
You know, PRSA really saw a need to take a leadership stance around informing not only our members, but having a resource for the industry to know where to start. And one of the things we really take pride in is our code of ethics. And so aligning our code of ethics with a resource that gives members a place to understand where to begin with AI guidelines. That was the core message of what we wanted when we started Promise and Pitfalls.
And so what are the biggest ethical risks that PR pros face when using generative AI tools?
Yeah, there's lots of concerns out there right now. I'd say one of the top concerns that is out there for our members is really mis and disinformation continues to be one of the top things that we see. As you start to think about compliance issues, intellectual property, all of those things for communicators are top of mind, and how they address those, not only for themselves, but for their teams, and how they balance those risks and weigh those with the efficiencies that can really be gained by using AI.
Yeah, we feel that for sure at our PR firm as well, as we're guiding our clients. Okay, so next question. Can you walk us through the key principles from the guide that PR pros should be adopting immediately?
Yeah, you know, I'd say the guide is really looking at it from a lens of if you're just starting out, looking at how you implement, how do we really leverage AI from a lens of trust and transparency? Those are core fundamentals of everyday communications. And we really want to give our members those tools that give them applications to use that in that kind of fair way. As one of the things that we see as we're starting to look at how we're modernizing and advancing AI technology, there's been some new advancements that we've seen that have been key. And I'll just highlight a couple of those things that are really top of mind right now. And that's everything from do we disclose that we're using AI? It was interesting. Just last week, I was at our Arkansas chapter put together their first AI event in conjunction with the Arkansas business. And one of the keynote speakers, she actually takes the stance of, did we disclose when we use Google or the internet in general? And it's just because of where we're at right now. Probably in a couple of years, we won't be in the same place where we say, this was generated with the AI, but because it's so early on, it's one of those things that you're looking at and thinking, yeah, it needs to be disclosed. So it's going to be really interesting as these things advance and how our guidelines and guidance changes along the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny because we started doing that, disclosing we used AI to do something in the spring of 2023. And then we started quickly getting away from it. And then I've noticed in my flash briefings on my answer engine, my Alexa device, that when I do my Wall Street Journal morning report, it has now said at the end of each take, it says, heads up, we used, artificial intelligence to generate these these briefings based on existing news reports, and then those summaries were reviewed by a human editor.
Yeah.
And they just started doing that like this month, maybe last month. And to me, I feel like that's very unnecessary, because I was already assuming you were doing it. And if you are having it reviewed by a human editor before a human is reading it, I don't know that needs to be disclosed in the way that they're currently doing it. And if they're just now starting to do those things, I feel like they're a little bit behind.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah. So walk us through the key principles from the guide that PR pros should be adopting immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. The transparency and disclosure in AI content right now, that's one of the key guidelines. Next, it's around training and education for communicators. There's some organizations right now, not only in communication space, but across the board, where they've got different restrictions, and so they're not really enabling their teams to tackle and understand how AI is advancing. We take the stance that education and training is going to be key. I'm sure we'll talk about how some folks see AI replacing roles. We don't see that as what's happening, and so the upskilling and the advancement of training is going to be a big fundamental in that. Next, automation in HR and hiring processes. This is one of those things where, one of those efficiency areas is key. And so some organizations with their ATS systems have already automated and leveraged AI in ways that's different. That's one of those things that we think needs to be really looked at. The mis and disinformation piece and combating that is probably one of our biggest areas for advocacy for the industry. And that's really the biggest area where we think members can fact check and authenticate the data that's out there and ensure that before putting something out, that your stamp is behind what's there. And then finally, responding to current and future compliance and government regulations is going to be another big piece of where this takes us.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with you. If the fact checking could be a little tighter and the accuracy, that would be very helpful for everybody. I'm confident. So yeah. So for our audience, we're in our first section where we're talking about AI and PR ethics. Then we're going to move on to AI in practice, PRSA's role, and then talk a little about personal and leadership. Also, at the end, we've got a special offer from PRSA for our audience. So be sure to stick around for that. What advice would you have for leaders who want to empower their teams to use AI, but also protect brand integrity and trust? And I know you've addressed some of that earlier.
Yeah, I think as a leader, you really need to be able to set clear expectations with your team around what the role is of AI and what it is for your organization may be different than somebody else's organization. Whether it's a case of, hey, let's start to experiment, see how it might work for our business. Versus we're already in the trenches of what AI can do for us and starting to generate content. I heard some interesting data recently too around how communicators are leveraging AI tools. And right now, one of the top areas is around brainstorming ideas, pitches, things like that. Those are very low risk ways that you can start to implement and encourage your team to leverage the data without compromising your organization's reputation. And so I would highly encourage leaders to not be afraid and start to embrace and leverage your team's insights, because folks at all levels, especially those coming up who may be newer to their roles, may be very advanced and bring things to the table that other folks don't have an interest in yet. And so being comfortable with that sharing and training across your teams is really going to help leverage that insight and expertise.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know about, I can't speak for our audience, but I know for sure we are actively using a lot of tools, AI tools at our agency, and starting to use more AI tools than not AI tools, at least in my personal daily workflow and tech stack. Are there legal or reputational risks for organizations using AI generated content without review or attribution?
I think so. I haven't had deep conversations with attorneys, so I wouldn't take this as legal advice. But where we are with mis and disinformation, I think that as a communicator, putting out anything that compromises your reputation is going to be a risk, and when you start to look at intellectual property and what's out there, you want to ensure that that accuracy is key, and what you're communicating to your publics is front and center. So I would definitely say consult with your legal counsel around how you're starting to implement and use and leverage AI before you go out there. And one of the other big areas of risk is the approach of agentic AI, and I think that side of it probably carries heavier risks than what's happening now with the communications. But both sides, I would say that you've really got to take a stance and be prepared with what kind of information you're putting out.
For our audience, when you say agentic AI, what are you referring to?
Yeah, it's referring to the kind of automated decision-making processes that companies are using. So it's more along the lines of, let's say an insurance company is using AI and data that they have for their customers to make automated decisions, or something along those lines, to make a right or wrong. And I think that's where the human component plays a part again, where somebody's eyes are taking a look before a decision's made on something. And that's just good guidance, I think, across the board.
Sure. Okay. Last question on this section is, how can public relations professionals stay informed about evolving AI best practices without becoming overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think that, these trends are evolving so quickly that you have to find a way to stay on top of it. And so organizations like PRSA, our commitment is really developing those resources, training, and education to help our members stay ahead of what's around the corner. And so we've launched and developed a new certificate program that'll be kicking off next month. There's 5 modules, and basically within that, we try to prepare our members on whether you're new to AI or it's something you've been using, how you can continue to employ that in your practice. And then I would say when you attend conferences and be able to connect and network with colleagues, those are where you get some of the greatest ideas and insights of what's happening. Just staying on top of those trends any way you can. We're all busy, but it's one of those things that you have to make time for.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. Before we move on to the remainder topics we want to cover during this episode, including AI in practice, we're going to take a quick break and be right back with more from Matt Marcial with the Public Relations Society of America. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to On Top of PR. We're still talking about AI for public relations. And in this section, we're going to talk about AI in practice. So Matt, welcome back. Thanks you for being here today. Glad to have you. And let's see. So what are some practical and responsible ways PR teams are already leveraging generative AI?
Yeah, I heard an interesting statistic from the conference board recently that about 86% of comms practitioners have utilized AI in some way. So it's not foreign. I think some practical tips around the usage is really just starting out, and that spirit of experimentation is going to be key to see how you can really leverage it for your business in ways that make sense. There's going to be organizations that are way ahead of the curve, and then you've got some that are very in the very early stages of trying things out. And the biggest thing to not get left behind is just to get started. And if you don't know where to get started, it's really about educating yourself and start to understand how you can use AI in ways that make sense. And so just taking those steps are going to be a big move forward to make sure that you're not left behind.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the importance of testing, transparency, and collaboration. And your tip stood out to me earlier when you mentioned that you could put a document, I don't want to misquote, but you basically said you could put content into a generative AI tool and get feedback on it. And I think that's one of the most powerful ways. It's always helpful. I think we've got plenty of other podcasts episodes we'll link to in the episode notes where we've talked in detail on different shows that we've done or episodes we've done about using AI. But I do think that, I've said before, AI is like an intern or an entry-level employee. They need a supervisor, right? It's a great beginning, but a terrible ending, meaning it's a great first draft, but a terrible a final draft. But I find that I'm interacting with generative AI tools by just saying, hey, make this better, make this clearer, shift the focus more on the audience than on the sender or the sponsor of this message, and things like that. But even then, it will, as we talked about, it'll make mistakes and you'll have to go back and supervise its work ultimately.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you hear about some of these stories about the hallucinations or those things that happen when you get something back from the generative AI that are just flat out wrong or are inaccurate, and people are taking those things, there's been attorneys who've used that in legal briefings and they've been thrown out because completely inaccurate. So that is top of mind. It's got to be key with anything that you're doing with putting it into practice.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And I think, unfortunately, there's, the best way to learn is through trial and error. And sometimes those errors can be bigger than the smaller errors. And I can remember one time we took a CEO of one of our clients and we had generative AI write a bio for them. And I recorded a video showing this working and then took the document that output and just kind of saved it in our drive, for somebody to go back to and look at later. Well, the person that we created that video for to go back and look at later actually never watched the video, found the bio, and actually sent it to a reporter for an interview that our client was doing. And fortunately, we were able to fix it early enough to save face, but it had some hallucinations in it that weren't quite accurate. And I share that transparently as an example of, good intent of demonstrating and doing a training session on an example of an output that had some hallucination, but we didn't properly label the file. And so there was an assumption that the file was not only correct, but approved. And it was neither one of those things. So
yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. So as we look at kind of the different areas of PR, media relations, crisis, internal comms, do you have a sense on, kind of where AI is having the most impact right now?
I'd say that it's having an impact for anybody who's leveraging it. The use case of research, I think, has probably got the lowest adoption compared to if you look at brainstorming and drafting initial content ideas. Those have very high pickup right now. So those who are using it to say, how can I improve my output? That's doing great use. But I think that the research side is probably a little bit underestimated. When you think of what the definition is of an LLM, these systems are designed to take massive amounts of data and leverage that data for output. So, it's a fantastic research assistant if you can validate the information and the data that's coming out of it. So all of those use cases are going to be great regardless of where you are in the comm space and leveraging it.
Yeah. Speaking of the not being certain of where people are in our audience in the comm space, LLM is large language model for those that aren't yet aware of that. So Matt, do you see AI as more of a productivity tool or strategic partner in the day-to-day communication role? Or is it both?
Yeah, I think it could be both. Right now, I'd say most are using it as a productivity tool, but I think as where we're headed as an industry, and when you start to hear folks talking about, is it going to replace my job? We don't think it's going to replace your job as long as you're staying on top of how to use the tool and how to become more strategic. I see it becoming more of a strategic partner so that those roles can really be elevated to being more of folks who are designing more strategy for their clients and not spending so much time on those things that are taking up, time to be less productive. So that's how it's really moving forward. And I think how you can start to, as you advance your usage of it, where we'll be in several years.
All right, well, let's transition to our next series of questions that are about PRSA's role in artificial intelligence. Matt, tell us, how is PRSA helping professionals navigate the fast-changing AI landscape?
Yeah, first and foremost, we want to be the go-to resource for education. So we are investing a lot right now in developing new tools and research to do just that. Like I mentioned earlier, we've got a new certificate program that'll be launching next month. We've got our international conference that's taking place in Washington, D.C. in October. And in advance of that conference, we also have a pre-conference session just dedicated around AI. And so for those who have interest in those topics, those are going to be the types of things that you continue to see. As an organization, PRSA really needs to be focused around how we're continuing to see around those curves around the technology trends. And then the second area is going to be around advocacy. As an industry, as things impact us that we may not be aware of just yet, we're going to be the voice for how we're standing up for the profession and those folks who are serving the industry. And so those are things that we're committed to continually updating and continue to do.
So when you think about kind of PRSA members and AI, what do you sense is the finger on the pulse of your membership? Are they excited, skeptical, concerned, some sort of hybrid of those feelings?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. I think we see folks across the whole spectrum right now. And as I'm talking to members, we have some who are very engaged, who are using it every day in their business, and they see the value in it. And then we've got some who don't even know where to begin. And so we want to be here for wherever you are on that journey. But again, it's where you're at and where, just like any kind of education within the industry, we've got folks who are just starting out, who may be in the student community, PRSSA, and transitioning into their first professional role. But I'll tell you, Jason, it's really interesting. As I've talked to industry leaders, one of the things that they're saying is, those entry-level positions are going to be the first ones that, for those who are coming out of college, if they don't have that AI knowledge and insight already, it's going to be the toughest for them to find roles in the industry. And so we want to prepare, no matter if you're just starting out, just graduating, or if you're a seasoned professional and wanting to advance your skill set, have something along the way for everybody on that career journey and that AI path to understanding what the tools are.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. In fact, I was recently on a panel with some other PR practitioners, and unfortunately, I was the only one on the panel, giving a strong advisory to the room that they need to be adopting AI right now. This was earlier this same year, and of all the other panelists, none of them were using AI in their agency at the moment, which baffled me. They were telling the audience that they didn't think that, it was that necessary for them to stay on top of AI, which baffled me. And then the third thing they said was that AI was no threat to their employment. And I was the contrarian one, saying, if you're doing what they're telling you right now, which is not exploring AI and not implementing it into your day-to-day professional functions, then yes, AI will replace you, because they'll just hire somebody who understands how to use it, and then that person will become more valuable. And I've been doing this long enough, I can equate it to when email first came out and mobile phones came out and text messaging and social media, the organization and even, search engines and search and optimization, the professionals who were not embracing and leveraging those technologies as they were emerging and the organizations they work for were all behind because they didn't jump on it earlier. And just like you said earlier, there's no point in attributing that you used a Google search to find this information. You attribute it to the actual source that was used, just like you would when you're using generative AI. So, my difference of opinion was that, hey, if you're not skilled with AI, you'll be replaced by somebody who is, number one. And number two, I expressed that, the other threat, I think, to their employment is not only AI, but, an overseas worker who has been well educated, in our particular case, in U.S. English, both speaking and writing, and has a very enthusiastic attitude about the ability to do public relations and work at for an American corporation from their overseas location for a lower wage than what somebody else might be asking in the marketplace. So I think those are kind of two or three big disruptors that our colleagues need to be looking at and paying close attention to.
100%. And we've been asked, our agencies dying off, and I think that it is going to be those ones that don't want to adapt and change. If you're not moving forward, you will be left behind. It's just like you said, email, the internet, all of these things that come about. We have to latch on, and we have to continue to upskill our teams and ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree. If looking at our inbound leads and pipeline, I would say that doesn't seem the marketplace thinks that PR agencies are going anywhere. Our service is in higher demand. We're recording this August 18th of 2025. Anything can change, but we haven't seen this level of demand since right after the pandemic. So something is going on in the marketplace. It might be because of our thought leadership about talking about artificial intelligence, but I think at the end of the day that, companies are still leaning on their agency, not only to lead them through PR difficulties, but also guide them through, evolutions in the profession, like we're seeing right now with generative AI. Absolutely.
That thought leadership and that latching on to where we're headed is key, and the clients see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth or innovation within PRSA over the next few years under your leadership?
Yeah. We have a new strategic plan that we launched just before I came on board. That was actually one of the things that drew me to the organization, is the forward thinking approach to where we're headed and taking the industry. And I'd say, our relevance to PR practitioners, not only those who have always seen themselves as PR professionals, but those who are communicators outside of the scope of a traditional PR professional. And so that could be anybody who's leveraging communication, whether you're a traditional writer, a videographer, folks who are using different means to communicate. PRSA is the resource where we want to be that all-encompassing space for communicators and leveraging strategic communications. So we are taking bolder voice on issues that impact our members, the industry, and the profession. And like I said, developing those tools and the education that is most relevant. And so technology, we've done some recent surveys around what areas are impacting our members, and technology, AI development is top of mind for sure. And so this conversation is right on time. And so like I said, we're investing more around those conversations and those resources than ever before.
Excellent. So a quick little sidebar here. We want to briefly mention this new DEI toolkit PRSA just released. The timing on this is interesting and notable in that, in many ways, DEI politically is falling a little bit out of favor under the current administration, and some companies have backtracked a little bit on it. Some companies are, going even more full steam ahead. PRSA has released a new toolkit. I want to know, why is this important right now, and how can PR leaders effectively use it effectively? But also, I'm assuming this toolkit was in progress before we had a new administration, and maybe you could give a little background on that, Matt.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking, Jason. So the DEI is fundamental to PRSA's core. We see it as something that's in the fabric of our organization that is not only just a standalone program or committee within PRSA, but it's something that we see as critical to everything we do and what we stand for as an organization. And so we do have a DEI committee who's led the charge on this new toolkit. And what we wanted to develop was a resource for our chapters and our members to be able to have tangible takeaways that they can not only educate themselves around modern day practices for implementing DE&I across their board to be more inclusive for their local chapter members, but things that they could leverage across the board. So that was the impetus for us developing this toolkit that was that's now available. And we've received fantastic feedback from the members and around our stance, not only for us not backtracking around DE&I, but moving forward and helping our members really understand how they can continue to play a part in moving the needle forward.
We're definitely at an interesting point right now because, there's a lot of business case and evidence to prove that, DEI is good for business, and good for the economy, and rising tide floats all boats. And I think it's all about how it's positioned, how it's managed, and how it's communicated. Of course, we've seen clients, especially those that are owned by overseas companies, where they are all in on DEI, and yet having to create a separate policy or a separate approach domestically to their U.S. communications, their U.S. comm. And so that's been interesting to not only watch and guide our clients and help them lead through it, but then we have other clients who are very active in, government contracts and worried about, they might say something that will cost them work from the federal government, for example. So, we're really been helping our clients navigate that. And I'm sure, that other PR practitioners that are consuming this episode are probably under, similar challenges of, knowing what is in the best interest of the organization, but also having to balance, external forces and factors, and probably even internal concerns and frustrations. So I'm sure this toolkit is a very helpful to that practitioner who might find themselves in that role.
Absolutely. And we've seen the same things with members who are coming from the government sector, academia. They're all facing those same challenges. And we want to support them while holding strong to what we believe is our core value as an organization.
Excellent. So you already covered what attracted you to take on this new role. So I'll skip over that and jump into, what advice would you have for today's rising PR professional who wants to lead the profession forward?
Yeah. I think the best thing you can do is get involved, find a mentor. And one of the best things about PRSA that I saw when I came on board is that it's such a passionate community. The folks are so welcoming. We have our APR accreditation. It's the accreditation in public relations. And I'm going through the process myself right now because I really want to understand more of the specific know-how that our members are doing day to day. I come from an association background, but understanding that piece is key. So I would say if you're new to the profession, really just finding a mentor, finding folks that you can talk to, those are going to be the best ways to really see how you can get involved. If you're a part of PRSA or another organization, volunteer. Those are some of the best ways that you can really engage and just find a path to your own growth and professional development.
Yeah, that's perfect. And so that is a natural tie-in to talking about where our audience can go to learn more about PRSA and potentially get involved as a member.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'd love to offer any of your listeners who aren't currently a part of PRSA a special promo code. It is PRPRO D25, and that'll waive your initial initiation fee for membership, or if you're a lapsed member, it'll waive that reinstatement fee. We'd love to have you join the community and see what PRSA is all about. There's a lot of great momentum and passion for the industry, like I said.
Well, Matt, I really appreciate you offering that as a benefit to our audience, and we always encourage our guests to do that. So thank you for supporting On Top of PR's audience with this promo code. Again, that's PRPRO, the letter D25. So I would consider to be PRPRO, and D is in discount 25, and that will unlock the reinitiation fee or the first time initiation fee if you decide to join PRSA. And you have just a couple months to do that. It's good till the end of the year. And so it'd be a great way for our audience to have a little benefit for being loyal to us and get them reconnected or connected with the Public Relations Society of America. And Matt, one more thing I just want to add is you may not know this, but Axia Public Relations has a scholarship program through the PRSA Foundation where we award a scholarship each year to a deserving college student who does not have to be a PRSSA member, but obviously, most PR students are. And so we've been giving away that scholarship for, I think this is our 10th year, and really grateful for the PRSA Foundation to equip and enable us to be able to do that, because otherwise we would really struggle to be compliant and do it the right way if we didn't have a partner like your organization to do that with.
Fantastic. Yes, we appreciate that continued support, Jason. And I know the students get a lot of value out of that.
Yeah, well, we're glad to do it. That's our way of giving back and advancing the profession. So as we wrap up, I want to make sure our audience, one, knows how to get a hold of the AI resource guide we've mentioned. We're going to put that in the episode notes and a link to it from there for everybody's convenience. So you can just go to ontopofpr.com, find this episode with Matt, or go to ontopofpr.com/Matt-Marcia. And then from there, we'll put in a link to your LinkedIn, but that seems to be the best way to connect with you on social media. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great.
Okay, perfect. All right. With that, is there anything else we should cover before we sign off today?
I know this has been a great conversation, Jason. It's been fantastic being with you today, and love to connect with any of your folks who want to learn more about PRSA.
Yeah, same here. We appreciate it. We appreciate the advocacy and support of PRSA. We're very excited about your leadership there and the impact you're going to have to make it an even better organization.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so with that, this has been another great episode of On Top of PR. I know you all listening and viewing this appreciate us helping you stay on top of PR, especially when it comes to generative artificial intelligence. So if you found this episode helpful, do me a favor and either leave us an online review at ratethispodcast.com/ontopofpr, or even better, take a moment to share this episode with a colleague that you think would benefit from it. So we want to take a moment to thank Matt for participating in this episode and sharing his insights with us. And we want to thank you for allowing us with the opportunity to help you stay on top of PR. This is Jason Mudd from Axia Public Relations signing off. I hope something great happens to you today. Be well.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.